What's up YouTube? This week I wanted to show you guys this crazy mashup custom that I just finished. This is the Air Trainer 1 with the Zoom Flight 95. I combined both to make what I like to call the prototype Flight Trainer 95. This was a fun but challenging custom for a few different reasons, so I'm going to walk you through the process and how this custom came to be. A week ago, I decided to hit the local Nike outlet for some inspiration to do a custom I've never done before. Going in, I wasn't exactly sure what I was looking for. I saw a lot of Jordan 1s, Dunks, stuff like that, but honestly, I didn't want to work on any single shoe that I've done before. As I was looking around, I found a few options I thought I could do something with, but what stood out to me the most were these flights because of that massive sole. My first thought was to find an upper that had bright colors or a unique design. There was tons of options, Jordan 6s, trainers, LeBrons, and sneakers I've never seen before. I really like the Mac Attack upper, but after looking at it closely, I don't think it will work for what I need. After spending a good hour looking around and even trying on some clothes, I decided to stick with some Zoom Flight 95s for the soles and found this pair of Air Trainers that has a lot of potential for the uppers. Now looking at it now, this mashup is definitely interesting, but at the time, I wasn't sure how it was going to work out. To get the ball rolling, I had to start deconstructing both sneakers. I started with the Flight since I'm only going to be using the outsoles on these. I always start deconstructing by removing any pieces I may use in the future or for this project, such as the tongues, back tabs, insoles, etc. Once all the pieces were removed, I took these to the sink and poured some acetone directly into the sneakers. Doing this is going to start breaking down the factory glue between the upper and the sole. Typically, you can let the sneakers sit like this for a bit and come back to them, but to speed up the process, I like to use a steamer. I put it inside the shoe and let the steam melt the glue. It saves time and makes peeling off the upper way easier. That's one shoe deconstructed, on to the next. The trainers were a longer and more tedious process. Because I needed the uppers on this pair, I couldn't use acetone method I used on the flights because they would greatly risk damaging the uppers in the process of peeling the sole off. So I had to go with the method using a flathead and a heat gun. What I did here was tape off a small section of the shoe along the sole. I used blue tape because it doesn't leave any residue from the heat on the uppers. Then I heat up a flathead for a few seconds. Make sure the flathead is as skinny as possible, then carefully wedge it between the upper and the sole. I use this method because honestly, I don't really have any other solution to get this job done without messing up the uppers. If you might have a suggestion, let me know below and maybe I'll give it a shot. Once the uppers and the soles were completely separated, it was time for the most important step in any customization, prep work. Prep is 100% the most important step. If I were to skip this step or do a poor job with the reglue, it will simply not hold. Prep is always different depending on the materials you're working with. In this case for the midsole, I'm going to be using a glue eraser to create some friction going back and forth until I see some peeling. I then take my time and carefully peel it all off until I no longer see old shiny glue on the midsole. The foam on the midsole can be delicate, that's why I didn't use the Dremel, but for the rubber toe cap, it's a different process. Since that part has a tougher material, to remove the glue with ease, I use a Dremel with a metal drill bit and medium speed. That's the best way to remove the glue off the rubber and not ruin the texture on the sole. I always finish the prep on the soles by giving it a good wipe down with acetone to remove anything I might have missed or oils that can mess with the new glue. Looking at the new midsole for the upper, I thought there was way too much white, so I knew I had to do something different. I had some leftover black dye from the Ice Cube project that I reheated up to dye the sole. For the best results, the water has to be almost boiling hot. This process sometimes takes hours, but the results are always different depending on the materials you're dyeing. After 4 hours, I took the sole out of the tank to see the results and I was completely shocked by it. Like I mentioned before, you never really know what's going to turn out like until you pull it out. I was really happy with the results. The soles and the pods of the midsole took the black perfectly. The midsole was super unexpected. I got this olive army green tone that I'd never seen before from using black dye on a white midsole. I was expecting all black, but this turned out way better. To keep the project moving, I went to the sink with our Rejuvenator solution and medium bristle brush to scrub all the excess dye off. You don't want to leave any dye on the sole because it can easily stain the uppers. I found this perfect swoosh from an Air Force One that was in the boneyard. It's perfect for what I needed, it gives it a nice pop, and it's big enough to cover up the old holes. At first I kind of liked the chrome, but the more I looked at it, it was pretty random. So I grabbed the blade and carefully chopped the zigzag stitching to get it off. I put the original swoosh over the new one to make sure I knew exactly where to cut the tail off. I then lay some glue down on the upper and swoosh to glue it together. The reason I do this before I sew it in is so the swoosh can stay locked in place while it's on the machine, especially because the new swoosh needs to cover up the original holes and I can't risk the swoosh slightly moving. To finish it off, I use a post press to sew it in place. Using an original swoosh that had holes already made it super easy to go in and drop the needle in the original holes to get it perfectly sewn in. The next step before I can glue on the new sole onto the upper, I gotta create a new line using a heat removable pen. I'm going to start on the back to make sure that's lined up properly. I want the Nike Air to be centered perfectly. When it comes to this spot right here, I don't want this midsole touching the swoosh, so I got to watch out for that. On this area, I want the midsole to be right underneath the stitch line. And this part is going to be by far the hardest. I got to tuck in that entire original glue line underneath the new sole. Once I was confident with my new glue line, I started shaving off a thin layer of the upper where I would be applying the new glue as well as removing the old glue during the process. This process helped the new glue stick to the uppers nicely without getting in the way of a strong bond. Both original tongues on the uppers are pretty boring, so it was a no-brainer that I had to replace it. Luckily, I had some fresh donor tongues from the donor 1994 baseball cleats that I used a few weeks back on the Dion restorations. I went with those tongues because of how clean and simple they looked. This hybrid design was looking busy, so I needed something on the minimal side, and these black tongues with the vintage Nike Air on the tongue was a nice touch. To help the new tongues flow nicely on the trainers, I also sewed in the bottom suede piece from the original tongue that was removed. The final piece to making the tongue perfect was sewing in the flight tag from the Zoom flights. I had originally wanted to sew it in the back of the trainer, but it looked way more organic on the tongue in between where the laces will go. To lock everything in place, I went back and forth laying down glue on each piece, then used the post-bed machine to sew everything together. I made the sewing look factory by just going over the original stitch holes. As much as I like the olive green on the midsole, the uppers needed a touch of green as well to tie all the pieces together. I figured the best spot would be in the panel on the back since it already has a light base color to work with. As always, I prepped the leather with some acetone and cotton balls to remove the factory finish so the paint could stick to it with no issues at all. I taped all around that area and I airbrushed the green. When it comes to using the airbrush, it's best to do so with light coats to get the cleanest results. Honestly, the green was needed. It tied everything together really nicely. The hardest part about this whole project was gluing the upper onto the sole. This part takes the most concentration to ensure that everything lines up and bonds perfectly. I used Bar Super Stick to get the job done, and in my opinion, it's the best stuff to do a quality glue job that will hold for years. Just make sure to wear a mask and be in a well-ventilated area when using it. In my 14 years of restoring and customizing shoes, I haven't found a better glue yet. The trick to laying down the glue on the uppers is to take your time. Since the uppers had suede, my hand had to be very steady to not slip and get some on the uppers because it won't come off. Once the glue has been applied on the uppers and soles, I usually let the glue cure for a couple hours until it's not tacky anymore before I start bonding everything together. I started this re-glue by bonding the back to make sure the Nike Air was perfectly centered. With the heat gun, I heat up small sections at a time on the upper and the soles before I stick it together. Very little heat is needed to get the glue tacky. After the back looked good, I let it cool down for a few minutes before jumping over to the toe cap area to repeat the exact same process of making sure everything lined up symmetrical as best as possible. Alright, so I rarely mess up, but when I do, it sucks. I had to go in, rip this side fully open, remove all the old glue from the toe cap and this side on both the midsole and the upper very carefully. The reason is because when it came to doing the toe cap area, there was a huge gap, and that's because I did this area first. If I would have just left this part open, did the toe cap first, it would have been a lot smoother, but I ran out of room. So that's exactly why I opened this part up. It's just gonna make it a lot easier to do the toe cap. So I already got all the old glue off, reapplied glue. I'm waiting for it to fully cure. I'm gonna wait a couple hours. This time, I'm gonna start with the toe cap and then work my way over here. This sucks. Once all the glue was removed, I carefully reapplied the glue on the upper and sole and held it apart so they could not touch at all during the curing process. The final details I thought about was painting the Nike on the strap white to give it a nice pop. I also added the stencil on the side in a military stencil font to go with the rest of the look. I plan on doing more of these customs and I want to add this prototype stencil to all of them. This is one of those projects that I really enjoy doing. From the very beginning, I was just kind of going with the flow of it, not expecting at all what I was going to come up with. I went to the store, came out with 2 different pairs of shoes that I never worked on before, and I mashed them together to create this. This isn't exactly something I would wear, but it looks really sick to look at and admire. It has military vibes thanks to the olive green tone on the midsole and the gray and black on the uppers. The black pods on the midsole give it that alien futuristic look, one of my favorite details about the whole shoe. The white swoosh gives it a nice pop. The flight on the tongue is another one of my favorite details. As far as the rest of the shoe goes, I can't wait to put it up on display. Like I said, I plan on doing more of these. Let me know in the comments what you want to see next. I got a special promo code for you guys to use on our Rejuvenator website. Use promo code FlightTrainer to save 20%, but it's only good for the next 24 hours. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. This is Vick Almighty. I'll catch you guys on Monday. See you guys.